The library can be an interesting place filled with stories of all kinds. Sometimes our minds even take us into the stories we're reading with no lingering problems. But for the girl in our story, however, things get a little too personal when she finds a strange book with no title. Maybe it wasn't such a good idea for her to take it home. Grab your favorite snacks and join us for our Halloween ghost story, The Book. The girl loved reading ever since she was little. She was always at her local library looking for something new to read. She loved going through all the available books and finding a potential new title she hadn't read yet. But as the girl got older, she seemed to find less and less new books to read. She'd go through every book, slowly hoping to find something she hasn't read yet. In the end, she'd find nothing and go home disappointed. One day, as she was leaving the library empty-handed, the librarian stopped the girl before she could leave. The librarian explained how he had watched for weeks as the girl walked up and down the shelves looking for something new. He had debated whether or not he should tell her about the book he had kept behind the desk. When the girl asked why was the book kept behind the desk, the librarian explained how no one had ever finished the book, how whenever someone checked it out, they quickly brought it back the next day, never wanting to see it again. The girl thought how ridiculous that was, as she asked to see the book. The librarian reluctantly agreed and brought out a glass case with a very old-looking book. As it was taken out of its case and handed to the girl, she quickly noticed that it had no title or author's name. She asked about this and was told it never had one title. Confused, she asked the librarian what he meant. He replied with a question of if she wanted the book or not. She agreed, shaking her head as she gladly took the book and headed home to begin reading her new find. The librarian called out to the girl a warning to be careful with the book. Whether she heard him or not was unclear. The girl was out the door before he had finished his sentence. He could only hope that she had, considering all he had heard about that accursed book. Upon reaching her apartment, she put her purse down on the kitchen table and immediately sat down on her couch. The girl was too eager to focus on anything else. She was excited about her new book with no title. She studied the cover, noticing how it looked like it had been hand-carved. Someone really went through a lot of trouble to make this book look special. Upon opening it, it was easy to see that this book had different chapters, but no table of contents. That usually meant one entire story instead of multiple stories. Could it be about a princess finding her true love? She loved those stories and always wondered what it would be like to live that out. As she began to read, she became so engrossed in the story it told. A young girl and her love of books, the joy the girl took in finding something new to read, how going to the library weekly was like a treasure hunt for her. Then the story started to get a bit too personal for her. How the young girl in the story didn't have a great childhood, the father passing away when the girl was young, the mother always working and never home. The constant bullying from fellow students. The girl moving away to be on her own so she could be with her beloved books in peace. Then things started to get strange, as a story told of a book in glass offered by the librarian once he saw the girl was not finding anything else to read. The girl too eager to get home that she didn't hear the warning from the librarian. Now the girl was sitting on her couch reading the strange book up to this point. That's where the book stopped. The girl placed the book on the couch and went to wash her face in the bathroom. Looking at herself in the mirror, she was trying to figure out what was going on here. Not only did it seem that the book was telling her personal story, it also stopped exactly where she was in real life. This was not what she had in mind when she wanted to live out one of her books. Upon hearing a thump coming from the living room, the girl left the bathroom only to find the book on the floor and open to a new chapter. A chapter that wasn't there before. She was afraid to read it, knowing that it could only lead to trouble. Yet, her curiosity got the better of her, and she began to read the newly written chapter. As the girl read the new chapter, it accurately described how she felt at the moment. Confused, scared, and secretly fascinated all at the same time. How could this book know so much about her? It would be one thing if she was some sort of celebrity. She would expect someone to write her life story then, but she wasn't a celebrity. She was no one famous. So how could this happen? The girl went to her purse and took out her phone. Her plan was to call the library and speak to the librarian who gave her this book. He would have to know more about what's going on. When she dialed the number to the library, however, she got a strange message.
The number you have reached has been disconnected or is no longer in service. Please check your number and try again.
That was odd. She had that number saved in her phone for years. It has never changed or even been disconnected. She had even called it just this morning. Checking the number with the one in the phone book showed she had the right number. She wanted to make sure she hadn't mistakenly dialed the wrong number, so she dialed it again and again, got the same message.
The number you have reached has been disconnected or is no longer in service. Please check your number and try again.
This can't be right. She has the right number. She just checked it to make sure, so why was this happening? Looking at her watch, she saw it was 1 p.m. Still early enough to go back to the library and ask about this book. If she couldn't reach them by phone, she was going to talk to them in person. She grabbed her purse and headed for the door, only to find that it was strangely locked from the outside. How could this be? The locks are on the inside, not the outside. She had clearly unlocked her door, yet couldn't open it. She shook the lock and pulled on the door as hard as she could. Still, the door wouldn't budge. Reaching for her phone to call the super of her building, the door mysteriously unlocked and opened by itself. She stood there in utter shock, not knowing what to think, and shaking like a leaf. Taking her chance, she quickly grabbed the book and headed out the door before she was locked inside her apartment again. The girl was so lost in her own head. Too many weird things were happening to her ever since she brought that book home. Was this the warning the book was talking about? The same warning the librarian tried to tell her before she left for home? She was determined to get to the bottom of what was happening to her. She needed to talk to that librarian again and find out more about that book. He did seem to know more than he was willing to say. Maybe he himself was just as scared of the book. Or, at least its history, since he could only go by what others had told him. Either way, he knew something, and she was more determined than ever to get some answers. Yet, when she reached the library, it looked like it hadn't been in use in decades. The windows were boarded up, doors locked, outside facade falling apart, dead bushes and trees. A once very bright and lively place was now abandoned. This didn't make any sense, since she had just been here hours before. At least she thought she had. She double-checked the address and saw it was the right place. But how could this be, given the current state of the building? As she sat down on the steps to try and collect her thoughts, her phone rang. She answered it, wondering who it could be.
I told you the number was disconnected.
Dropping her phone on the ground, in a panic, she took off for her apartment, determined to get away from this place. If only she had left that book behind instead of her phone, it surely would have come in handy with what was to come. As the girl ran, she failed to notice a tall figure in a black trench coat standing in front of her. She excused herself as she looked at the figure, hoping not to have made them mad. Looking at the figure, she was shocked to see a dark shadow covering any semblance of a face. If there were any eyes, the girl couldn't see them. All she saw were yellow slits that looked like lights were shining from behind them. Any other features were hard to see under the shadow of the large-brimmed hat the figure wore, but what she did see shocked her to her core. The smile that graced the figure's face was horrific, to say the least. It spread over the entirety of the lower half of the figure's face, as wide as could be. So wide that it looked like it left no chin or cheeks. The teeth looked like that of a shark, ready to take a piece right out of the girl. Most horrific of all was the figure's tongue that seemed to slither out of the mouth like a snake and was forked at the end. The girl slowly took a few steps back as the figure stepped forward. She then finally got her body to work along with her feet as she took off back in the direction from whence she came. Unfortunately, she didn't realize she was running right back in the direction of the rundown library. Remembering she had dropped her phone near the steps, she quickly went over to pick it up and call for help. But when she got to the steps, her phone was nowhere to be found. She looked everywhere she had been when she had her phone in her hands.
Looking for this?
The girl spun around quickly and saw the figure had her phone in hand. That sick smile remained on what was supposed to be its face as it toyed with her phone for what felt like an eternity before smashing it on the ground. The figure let out a loud shriek as she began to run. She could hear the deliberate footsteps getting closer as she ran as fast as she could, How could that thing be catching up to her so quickly? It has to be a thing, some kind of creature. No human can look like that, or be that fast. That was impossible. She even began to wonder if she wasn't in some sort of nightmare. Maybe she had fallen asleep on her couch reading that book. Maybe if she only pushed herself hard enough, she would wake up.
Ouch!
Nope, not dreaming. So what was going on here? She needed to collect herself and catch her breath. As she slowed down, she finally began to pay attention to the second set of footsteps that were following her. She only heard her own. Still, she needed to get somewhere out of sight so she could rest. Seeing an alley on her right, she quickly stepped into its darkness, hoping to stay out of sight of the figure now following her. She let the darkness envelop her as she rested her back against a wall and slid down to the ground. Willing herself to breathe slower, she clutched the book in her arms as if in an embrace. It was the only thing she had to hold on to, even if she would rather not have it at all. It kept her grounded and in the moment. The book felt like the only thing that was real right now. As she began to catch her breath, she felt her body getting warm. It was normal, since she was just running for her life. What wasn't normal was how the subtle warmth slowly turned into a mild heat, then a hot breeze, almost as if something was breathing down her neck. Turning her head slowly, the girl saw nothing, yet she knew in her gut that something was in that alley with her. She eased herself up to her feet slowly, so as not to upset or disturb whatever was there with her. She slowly made her way towards the entrance of the alley to get away from whatever was there with her. Even though the figure was still lurking around out there somewhere, it was still much safer than being in here. But before she could make it to the entrance of the alley, a bony hand of some kind grabbed her ankle and refused to let go. She bent over to swat it away with her hands, but was harshly pulled to the ground. The book she was holding fell with a thud and slid well beyond her reach to the entrance of the alley. She clawed at the ground, trying to grab onto anything to help keep her from being pulled further into the alley. She wanted to scream for help, knowing that the figure was still out there, knowing that she hadn't seen another living soul in what felt like hours. Still, instinct kicked in as she tried to fight back, kicking at whatever was holding her. It was at this moment that she heard the footsteps of the figure getting closer before seeing a pair of shiny black dress shoes stop right at the book. Her eyes went wide as she looked up at the sickening smile of the figure, standing there seemingly enjoying her struggle. What she didn't know was that would be the last thing she'd see before being pulled deep into the darkness of the alley by whatever had a hold of her. Her blood-curdling scream was heard by no one as she disappeared to never be seen or heard from again. A gloved hand reached down and picked up the book off the ground. The figure in the trench coat studied the book before placing it in the black messenger bag. Looking back at the dark alley, the figure tapped the book inside the bag and began to walk away, blending in with the crowd now before the figure. The figure doesn't walk far before reaching a small bookstore and entering. Approaching the store owner, the figure pulled the book out of the bag and placed it on the counter. The figure smiled at the owner before finally speaking.
I'd like to donate this book.
The store owner looked at the strange book, then looked at the figure standing there. She just couldn't explain it, but she got an uneasy feeling in the pit of her stomach. Something was off about the whole thing, and she didn't like it one bit.
We hope you enjoyed our Halloween ghost story, The Book. Tune in at 12 p.m. Central Time, Friday, October 29th, when we will be premiering part 2 of our ghostly little story. If you want to check out more spooky fun from Sweet Little Duke, check out this playlist right over here. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more Sweet Little Duke fun and ring that notification bell to be notified whenever we put out a brand new video. Thanks for watching. Happy Halloween. Later.